Israel is pausing its attacks in some areas of Gaza to allow more aid into the enclave. And President Trump announced he's reached a trade agreement with the European Union. Good morning, I'm Nora Rahm from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. President Trump reached a trade agreement yesterday with the European Union. It's calling it a good deal, although it will mean 15% tariffs on EU exports to the U.S. when they were less than 3% before Trump took office. Terry Schultz has more.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen acknowledges she didn't succeed in getting President Trump to entirely drop the plan to add import duties on European products, but only to cut his original threat in half.
15% is not to be underestimated, but it is the best we could get.
Von der Leyen says there will be some zero tariff items, among them aircraft, some agricultural products, and critical raw materials. Other parts of the deal:
we will replace Russian gas and oil by significant purchases of U.S. LNG oil and nuclear fuels.
Von der Leyen says while tariffs will still be a challenge for some, at least now the destabilizing uncertainty is over. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
Back to school time is approaching, and the tariffs that go into effect this Friday may make it more expensive to equip students for the new year. Angela Hanks is chief of policy programs at the Century Foundation. It's a progressive think tank that conducts research and proposes policy changes. She says the tariffs may affect a range of items on the back-to-school list.
Backpacks or pencils or computers or food for school lunches. There are a number of expenses, and I think Americans are worried that all of those things will be made more expensive by tariffs this year.
She says many items are produced in China, which is subject to a 30% tariff. President Trump is meeting today with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at one of Trump's golf clubs in Scotland. Before going behind closed doors, both men agreed more must be done to relieve the suffering in Gaza. The World Food Program says about a third of the 2 million people there haven't eaten in days. Trump said the U.S. has provided aid, but other nations must step up.
The whole place is a mess. It'll get straightened out, but it's a mess. They have to get food and safety right now.
At least 115 countries are expected to attend a conference today in New York on the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It's being co-hosted by Saudi Arabia and France. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, released a video yesterday saying that children are dying of starvation in Gaza and that the world cannot turn a blind eye.
All countries have an obligation to take concrete steps to ensure that Israel, the occupying power in Gaza, complies with its obligations to ensure that sufficient food and life-saving necessities are provided to the population.
Israel denies it's deliberately starving them. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the UN should do a better job of distributing aid.
Stop lying. Stop finding excuses. Do what you have to do and stop accusing Israel deliberately of this egregious falsehood.
Yesterday, the Israeli military began halting operations in parts of Gaza for 10 hours each day to allow the delivery of food and other supplies. Syria says it's planning on holding its first parliamentary elections since the fall of the Assad regime last September. The country's new leaders are trying to reassure Syrians unnerved by deadly sectarian fighting in the country's south. NPR's Emily Fang has more on the story.
The elections are scheduled for mid-September. 2/3 of Syria's 210 seats in parliament will be up for vote. After the Assad regime suddenly crumbled last December, a government led by the former militant commander Ahmed al-Sharaa has been in charge. Sharaa's interim government also dissolved old political parties and the old parliament. But now Sharaa's government is on the back foot after more than 1,000 people died in fighting between Druze and Bedouin militant factions, as well as Syrian government troops. Though a fragile ceasefire is holding, the fighting reignited old tensions between Syria's many minority groups and heightened their distrust of Sharaa, who they allege is a Sunni Islamist. Emily Fang, NPR News.
For the first time in more than a quarter century, Russia unveiled a direct commercial passenger flight from Moscow to Pyongyang, North Korea. The move comes as the two countries expand their cooperation amid a standoff with the West over Ukraine. NPR's Charles Maines reports.
Russian officials are billing the once-monthly flight to Pyongyang as historic. connecting the capitals of Russia and North Korea for the first time since shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. Yet, contrary to Russian media reports of a sold-out flight, fewer than a quarter of seats were booked, most of them by North Koreans taking advantage of a direct flight home rather than a 10-day journey by rail. The reintroduction of commercial travel comes in the wake of North Korea's military support for Russia's war in Ukraine and times with the launch of a North Korean beach resort that Pyongyang hopes will lure thousands of paying Russian tourists to one of the world's most closed societies. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Police in New Orleans continue to search for an inmate who was mistakenly released from the city's largest jail. NPR's Matt Bloom reports the security lapse comes just 2 months after a major jailbreak.
The sheriff's office says 30-year-old Khalil Bryan was released from custody after staff mistook him for a different inmate with a similar last name. Orleans Parish Sheriff Susan Hudson apologized for the breach and says she's investigating.
This isn't about blame. This is about accountability and action, and we are taking both.
Bryan, who's facing drug and assault charges, remains at large. His wrongful release comes just a few months after 10 other inmates broke out of the jail. 9 of the escapees have since been caught, but 1 remains on the loose. Local officials and the Orleans Parish District Attorney have called the latest lapse deeply troubling. Matt Bloom, NPR News, New Orleans.
The Federal Aviation Administration is investigating an incident at Denver International Airport over the weekend. A jet had just taken off Saturday when a mechanical problem sparked a fire. Passengers used an emergency slide to evacuate. 1 person was injured. Marvel's Fantastic Four: First Steps got off to a super start at the box office this weekend. NPR's Bob Mondello has details.
In the comic book world, the Fantastic Four are known as Marvel's first family.
Whatever life throws at us, we'll face it together.
But in several previous attempts, the company's been unable to get these superheroes, who are variously stretchy, fiery, rocky, and invisible, to blast off on screen. This time looks different. Fantastic Four: First Steps will take in about $118 million in North America this weekend, and it will collect another $100 million overseas. That will put it right about where Superman was for its opening 2 weeks ago, and there's no blockbuster competition on the horizon, so...
It's clobbering time!
At least through Labor Day. Bob Mondello, NPR News.
I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News.